Hello everyone, this is Zibo and welcome to today's 10 Colosseum tips to improve your Colosseum gameplay. So today's video idea is provided by the user CaptainAnium and edited by myself. So this week I won't be around my PC and I probably won't be able to respond to your questions or comments immediately. But feel free to leave your questions for any Colosseum related stuff in the comment section below. I'm pretty sure there will be experienced users there to help you guys and answer you guys in case this video doesn't answer your inquiries. So without further ado, let us start with tip number 1, which is to always use teams with ranged heroes. So why do you do that? That is because every team nowadays in the Colosseum will have a tank unit or a unit with the taunt ability. So you have Future Princess, you have Ogma, you have Noxia. They're all units that can taunt your units, and if you use melee units to attack your opponent, there's a very high chance your melee unit will be taunted and forced to attack the tank unit or Noxia summon, and this will give your opponent's range team a big advantage because they can just stay in the backline and shoot you down. So that's something that you don't want, and you will want to use range teams unless you have a lot of stats or unless your heroes are super duper strong. Then most of the time range teams will always be better than melee teams. So tip number 2 is to always use all the tickets in your Colosseum. So every ticket will offer you 2 battle medals whether or not you win your opponent or lose your opponent, and you can't really buy additional battle medals with gems. So these tickets, they are very valuable once they are fully filled up. So you can keep up to 5 tickets and you'll be advised to use them as soon as possible once they are fully filled, because they'll be recharged once you use them. So you don't want to keep them at 5 tickets for way too long. And these battle medals, right, they are super important and super rare. There's only a few occasions you can get battle medals: your raid, your battle masters arena, as well as your Colosseum itself. So once in a while I think they do give it in roadmaps or event missions, but those are very insignificant. So that's that. So the best way to farm it consistently is to, number 1, play your arena, number 2 is to play your Colosseum consistently, and number 3 is to do your guild raid. So always use up your Colosseum tickets to participate in battle whether or not you will win or lose against your opponent. Tip number 3, do not use gems to refresh your opponent. So this may sound like a good idea, it's completely unnecessary because players that you can attack refresh every time you get attacked. So it doesn't really matter if you win or lose, and those players get attacked as well. So this means that you have more than enough opportunities to get new opponents because the point system within the Colosseum shuffles a lot. So unless you really dislike a particular individual within Colosseum, using your gems to refresh your opponent is not a great idea. So do not do that. Try to save up your gems for other purposes because it's really not efficient. So tip number 4 is to always position your background heroes in such a way that they can't really be hit too easily. So there are a number of heroes in the pool right now that can deal piercing damage as well as target your backlines. So units such as Mark 99, Future Knight, Kamel, Sohi, Rue, as well as Garums, all their attack can actually hit through your tanks and then go for your backlines, or either that they'll just chase after your backline. So what you can do defensively is to always tuck your range unit all the way at the back and then try to put a tank close to it. So defensively you can't really do too much because your opponent can reposition their unit so that they bait out your ranged attackers, but at least when you're on the offense you can actually check your positionings to see whether or not your range units will move in an awkward position. So by doing so, this will greatly increase your chance for victory. And like I mentioned earlier, you can actually check the positioning of your units, whether or not it will target the opponent's unit, by using a website link. So I'll link the Colosseum review in the description down below. So with this URL, you're able to position your units and predict whether or not your team, or rather your units, will go after the opponent's unit. So this is not 100% accurate, but it's very highly accurate. So I used to do it when I was pretty hardcore for Colosseum, but if you just want to inch out your victory and increase your chance of winning, then using this URL is pretty good because it will predict where your AI will go or predict where your opponent's AI will go, and this will allow you to plan your team and plan your units around it. Next, tip number 5 is to always use the right merge on the right characters. So I guess this is pretty self-explanatory, right? With the party preset feature, all you gotta do is make sure that your units are equipped with the right merchandise, equipped with the right accessories, equipped with the right weapons, and all you gotta do is press one button. So sometimes when you do your raid, you equip certain accessories or merge on other characters and you forget to bring it back to your Colosseum teams. So I guess this tip is pretty straightforward, right? There are certain merchandisers that are way stronger, like Statue of Bravery, Mariel Cushion, Invaders Mothership, and your vending machine, right? So these are accessories that are, or these are merches that are stronger in the Colosseum, and always remember to have them on your units because all these merches makes a huge difference in the battle of inches. And for tip number 6, always mind the positioning of your tanks. So your tank should ideally face the enemy tanks so that they can't really target your backline units, not because the enemy's tank has high damage, but because your ranged heroes will always try to run from them, and that usually means that they can be easily killed by enemies DPS heroes. So what do I mean by that? So when your unit actually taunts the other enemy's unit, right, if you are placing your tank on top or rather directly to the opponent's tank, your opponent's tank won't go for the backline. So this means that they can't really taunt your backline and your backline is in a much safer position. So this is in tandem with tip number 4, and for that reason, don't try to take any chances and let your tank face the opponent's tank head on, because the probability of your opponent's tank taunting your range unit is kind of high, and you kind of don't want that to happen to disrupt your range positioning. And move on to tip number 7, and always max out your weapon skill regen speed on your leader units. So nowadays the most popular leader units are Camille and Future Princess. So these two units always try to have the max weapon skill regen speed, because weapon skill regen speed is a determining factor in a lot of matches, because it always boils down to your opponent or you throwing the weapon skill first. So whoever throws the weapon skill first will always chain first and always gain a decisive advantage. So this is the very reason why Future Princess is so damn broken, because if you're able to throw out your weapon skill very quickly, you're able to chain your opponent immediately and enter your hero chain. So this chain cycle refreshes very quickly and could often win you games. So even till this day, even though Future Princess is not as strong as she used to be, she's still a top tier Colosseum unit simply because of the ability to control your enemies in one weapon skill. So this means that the faster your weapon skill regen speed, the better your Future Princess will be. So other than Future Princess, Camille has an excellent weapon skill as well. So having the highest possible weapon skill regen speed also benefits Camille to a large extent. So other leader units such as Garam, Arabelle, I don't think there's too much to say about them. Basically, the leader being able to unleash the weapon skill as soon as possible will often lead to winning the match, and that's why this point is super important. Okay, we have come to tip number 8, and that is always pay attention to the enemy team composition. So the numbers always come second, because yes, some teams will have a high DPS number while other teams will have a high toughness number, but you have to actually look at the units in the team and what is the purpose of the team in the Colosseum. So numbers in this case doesn't really matter if you have a subpar Colosseum team. So if you're using a meta team and your opponent is using like Mono Fire or using melee team or just using a team that's not really commonly seen, then they are actually at a disadvantageous position, not because they are weaker, but because their units or their team composition is simply not meant for the Colosseum. So sometimes they can simply overpower you with numbers, but most of the time you have a high chance of winning if your unit is more meant for Colosseum. However, there's a scenario where the numbers will matter, and that is when you're facing the same team composition. So let's say both you and your opponent is using the same lineup, then the numbers do matter, because you guys are using the same thing, and whoever hits harder, whoever survives longer will always have the advantage. Now, tip number 9 is always invest in your Colosseum team. So this is super important, because unlike other game modes, Colosseum is open permanently, and is your main gem income. So for that very reason, focusing on Colosseum teams should always be one of your highest priorities if you're a newcomer to the game, because this gives you more gems, this gives you more medals, and in the long run you can speed up your progress from all these freebies that you get in terms of the rewards. So if you're not too sure if you will use the same team later on, you can't really go wrong with improving your tanks, following my KR meta report to see what are the in-team setup, as well as look at the streams of like content creators that actively play Colosseum. So that's pretty much it for the 9th tip, and let us move on to the last tip of the day. So the last tip for today's video is always have a good balance of party buff within your team. So I won't really advise you to run like a full range party buff, right? You always need to have at least 1 or 2 defensive buff in your team. So you want to run a HP buff in Noxia or Future Princess, and then you can run a defensive buff such as Ogma and Arena. So this will give your defensive core, and then for the damage buff, you probably want your range attack as well as your crit hit chance. You can also use skill damage. It really depends on what unit you want to run, but having a good mix of defensive and offensive buff is often better than just running full damage, right? So this is more for the beginner. As you guys will realize, in the Colosseum right now, every single team will have at least one tank or have at least a unit that increases the HP for the whole party, and that is because the stats, or rather the HP stats within the Colosseum, is actually boosted, so your units will effectively get more HP if you increase them with your party buff. That's why always have a good mix in your party to make sure that in general your team is more rounded and is able to fight against more different types of enemies. And that's it for this video. Hopefully this video is helpful for you guys to improve your overall Colosseum gameplay. And if you like this type of video, do comment in the section down below, right? Let me know if you want to see more of this kind of tips and tricks videos, so that I can probably do more collab with CaptainAnium, so that he can provide the ideas and I can do more of such videos for you guys as well. Thank you very much for watching. Do remember to like and subscribe in order to see more videos from this channel. I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.